Timothy says, which is I think how dogma should be defined, like the Trinity.
But does that though help? Because I now remember you mentioning it, and then I lost track of it. 1 Timothy 3:16. All scriptures inspired by God, and it's profitable for for the man of God.
Yeah.
So already you must be a man of God for it to be profitable to you.
Yeah.
When one reads the structure of that sentence. But also, when Paul is writing, of course, he isn't thinking of Scripture in any other way than the Old Testament.
Well, I think he's using it as a category of Scripture. The graphe is just Scripture as a category. I mean, at the time he had the Old Testament Scriptures, but it seems he does quote Luke in I think it's in 2 Timothy. He quotes the part where Jesus says, what is it? A man should not, or a worker should not go without wages, or something like that. So he does seem to have some form of an idea of, a non-Old Testament canon. He then quotes Peter, or he says that, or rather, what am I saying? Peter quotes Paul and saying that there's his writings, his writings are Scripture. So I think he's using graphe Scripture as a catch-all category, as opposed to just the Old Testament.
Okay, now that's may well be, might not be, maybe. So I just wanted to say that was like, we have the same kind of problems as you were describing that I have in my trying to build a case for papal infallibility and a particular Catholic position on authority. And I'd say that to get to including the writings of Paul and Peter and the others, obviously we don't know whether, when Peter said the scriptures, the writings of Paul are hard to understand. Of course, we've got to accept that is by St. Peter. That itself is also scripture. Otherwise, it's worthless, isn't it? So in the end, and you may have got to that with my friend before I was all over the place with people. So forgive me if I missed it. What I was going to get to was this question of how one establishes the post-Old Testament documents as scripture. Yeah.
And of course, that's something that's been going back and forth between our traditions for years. And I think the very short answer would be a question actually, which is how does the Old Testament Jew in 50 BC know that Isaiah and 2 Chronicles is Scripture? And I think it's just the Spirit of God will lead the people of God to know the voice of God. John 10, Jesus says that his sheep will hear his voice. And of course, I mean, it was only until April of 1546 that Trent canonized actually made an infallible definition of the canon. So it wasn't even until then that we had, I think it was just the Lord used his church to give us, or rather for us to recognize the canon, not in an infallible way. I think it's a lot more messy than that. I think it's just the reality that God's Spirit used the church to help us know.
And of course, I think in all
a fallible list of infallible books. I'm not going to claim that I have an infallible canon. I think that would be a bit more of an issue. Only God knows.
But then, you see, I've heard that phrase, a fallible list of infallible books.
That's right.
But it seems to me, by definition, really, a fallible list might mean some of those infallible books are not infallible at all.
I think that's where then we come into moral certainty. Obviously, I don't have definitional, 100% formal certainty, but I have moral certainty that, John is Scripture because of the overwhelming testimony of the Fathers, the fact that it seems like it was written by John based on, internal evidence. And then, of course, there are more difficult ones, but the majority of the church has accepted those books for the majority of history.
Now, when you say the church, I know you got it in a broad sense, but I'm not sure it's as broad as it. I don't think it's so broad that it can embrace Protestantism, because that church, even if one doesn't say it's the Catholic Church, they never believed. Well, I've not seen any writings that really nail down a belief in sola scriptura, sola fide.
I would argue that. Oh, I think you can find those in the Fathers, but that's where we disagree. Yeah.